where you did not educate a person of color in any fashion, for they felt that a person of color, once educated, would become a problem to you. So therefore, save yourselves some grief, do not educate. Our John Parker took to these readings. He loved them. He read everything those kids brought him. He read Shakespeare. As a matter of fact, he became quite fond of Shakespeare. He read the poets. He read the classics. He read histories of all sorts. He read the doctor's periodicals that came to the house. He read the Bible. He even read the doctor's medical books. And if those kids weren't bringing him books fast enough, it was not uncommon for him to read a book 4 and 5 times, almost to the point of memorization. He read like this his entire life. He became a very intelligent person, yet he never ever set a foot in a classroom. Now the doctor's kids, as they grew older, they grew up a little bit. They needed an education of their own. Now, the doctor wanted to educate his kids as he had been, Eastern style. Problem was, there were no schools in the South at this time. There were grades 1 through 8, but there were no secondary schools or high schools, colleges or universities built at this time. So the whole family had to do a pilgrimage. John Parker went along with them. They came up the Mississippi River by riverboat and to the Ohio, and they crossed the Ohio River by riverboat to Pittsburgh, whereupon they embarked by stagecoach to cross Pennsylvania in an effort to get to Philadelphia, where all the schools were located at. Now, Pennsylvania at this time was largely inhabited by Quakers and people of the fringe persuasion. They didn't abide by slavery, nor hold with any of its rules. And as they saw young Parker traveling through with the family, they began to whisper things in his ear. They began to tell him things. Young Parker, he was confused. He didn't understand. He talked to the doctor and confided in him some of the things that were being said to him. The doctor knew right away what was happening here. He knew that they were trying to run his slave off. He was a businessman. He couldn't stand that. He sent John home immediately. And he went on to enroll his kids in school himself with the aid of his family. But upon return to Mobile, he took John Parker aside. He sat him down and he had a talk with him. He told him that if he did not want to go to the fields, it would be wise for him to learn a trade. Now everyone knew that you didn't want to go to the fields. Fields is where they worked you to death. And we're speaking literally. Not uncommon to die out in that hot sun in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. It's not even rare for 2 or 3 people to expire today. Life expectancy in the fields was 2 years. Everyone knew to avoid the fields if at all possible. Our John Parker did take on an apprenticeship. He took on a couple, but the one that stuck was at a foundry. An iron worker he became. Now this picture over my shoulder here is a depiction of what goes on in a foundry. We'll kind of set it up for you so that you understand what you learn. This bucket here is called a ladle. Once you put 2 or more different types of metal into the ladle, you heat it to its molten consistency, then you have an alloy. The alloy is then poured into a box mold, which are depicted here by these brown boxes. They are filled with sand and they are hollow in the center, in the shape of what you're trying to make. The molten metal flows through the sand, filling up the cavities and the extremities. You allow it to cool, then you open the box and retrieve the piece of metal that you're trying to make. It could be something intricate and small, like a set of gears for a piece of machinery, or it could be something large and bulky, like the steps on the front of this house. John Parker made those 150 years ago. And all we had to do was paint them. And John Parker found at this time that he had a talent. He had a gift. He could make molds better than the next person. He could make molds that were cleaner, fresher, and more accurate than people that had been doing it for 15 or 20 years. And they all started patting John Parker on the back and congratulating him, telling him, "You go, John Parker. You're the dude. You're the man." But he couldn't hear it. The seeds that had been planted in Pennsylvania were beginning to grow in his mind, and all he could think of was freedom and how to obtain it. he decided the best way to obtain his freedom is simply to run, for he had knowledge of the woods, and he thought he could exist in the woods. He was eager to give it a try, too. One day when no one was looking, he took off through the woods. It didn't work. The dogs caught him and brought him back. He was undaunted, though. He's going to try this again. This time he's going to foil those doggone dogs. He took off through the swamp that bordered Mobile. He did not count on the water moccasins that frequent the swamp, nor the 50-ton of alligator that are out there. And besides that, the dogs caught him and brought him back. Whenever John Parker had free time in Mobile, he would go down on the wharves and the docks, and he would watch the river boats come and go. He was always fascinated by the river boats. He thought them to be quite majestic. But in Mobile, whenever he got the opportunity, he would jump on one of these things. He would hide in bilge-rooms, storerooms, cloakrooms, closets, service rooms of all sorts, in an effort to escape, and it never worked. He was always detected. He was always returned to his owner. Now, there was a law in the land that stated, if your slave runs and is returned to you, you must punish him. You must punish him, and you must do it publicly for all to see. For they wanted to deter any efforts to escape. Now, they were quite imaginative in ways to punish. Everything from lashes to lynchings and all in between. The problem is, if you lynched your slave, it's hard to get any work out of them after that. So they would create methods and modes of punishing, yet still remain some kind of productivity from a person. One of the most common ones is they would take and cut your Achilles tendon right behind your ankle. It would render your foot as no good. Or the tendon right behind your kneecap, it would render the bottom of your leg unusable. And if you've seen a slave that was walk, drag, automatically you knew he had been a runner, caught, punished, and the message was clearly sent, do not do this, for the same thing will happen to you. Our John Parker was never ever punished for his misdeeds or his escape attempts. But the doctor got good and sick of it. For he knew one day John Parker was going to make good on an escape. He was going to shag down the road and say, see you later, Doc, I'm gone. And he didn't want that to happen, so he decided now is the time to get rid of John Parker. And he placed an ad in the paper for his sale. Now, John didn't realize that he was up for sale for the fourth time. When he found out, he flipped, he panicked, he freaked. For he knew he was certainly going to be sold as a field hand. He was going to have to work those dreaded fields of Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. He didn't want that to happen. He did everything that he could to turn the oncoming set of events. He talked to people. He begged with people. He pleaded with people. He bargained with people. And one of the ladies that he talked to at this time was a lady named Miss Elizabeth Ryder. He asked her if she would not purchase him from the doctor, allow him to pay her back, and thereby gain his freedom in that manner. She said no. But she knew John Parker. He was once a patient. She was once a patient of the doctor's. And as a lad, John Parker would drive the doctor to her house. She knew him to be a quote-unquote bad boy who would just run off and leave her holding the bag after she spent all that money, and she didn't want any part of a deal like that. So he talked to other people, and he wrote at this time that he felt like a big dog with a bad name. No one wanted anything to do with him, and he was getting pretty discouraged. Finally, Miss Ryder relented. She consented. She came around. Now here's the situation. The year was 1845. John Parker was 18 years old. The slave market out of New Orleans tells us that a young buck in his prime, which was considered to be 25 years old, keep in mind John Parker was only 18, sound of mind,